Well, thanks for watching Morning Live. Now, according to an article in BizTech, numerous skilled workers are leaving South Africa, with Europe, Canada and Australia being the top 3 popular destinations of choice. Now, while there's no official tracking of immigration, several pieces of data actually show that South Africans are leaving the country in droves. Now, these include the latest data from SARS, which shows that over 40,000 taxpayers have ended their tax residency in South Africa, as well as Henley Partners' latest Wealth Migration Report 2023, which shows that 400 high net worth individuals worth more than 80 million rand emigrated in 2022. Now, Generalist Senior Recruiter at REDi Recruitment Simonne Adcock says that immigration has been seen in all industries, including IT, digital, banking, engineering, executive and legal. And she joins us now virtually for a further discussion on this. Simonne, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just try and dig a bit deeper in terms of trying to understand the reasons behind this immigration and, what are the push-pull factors, especially in the 3 popular destinations, which are Europe, Canada and Australia.
Look, I think the feedback that we're getting is obviously from a quality of life perspective. I think as South Africans, we can all agree it's quite frustrating to live here with a lack of service delivery and that. But mostly it's people that have the ability to leave financially as well as having a passport. That's not a South African passport. The world is just their oyster at the moment. And when they've got skills that are in high demand in other countries, it is easier to leave as well.
So South Africans have been talking about the subject of the skills drain for quite a while now, Simonne, and there are, of course, different perspectives on this. And then you also have the headlines thrown in, headlines such as a surge in professionals applying for permanent residency in Canada. That was a recent example. What are the actual trends in terms of demographic data and factors relating to that? And also, just how huge of a concern is this for the country at the moment?
So I think the biggest concern, the drain brain aside, was that stats from SARS in terms of the amount of people that have left the country financially, and knowing that a lot of those are very, very top earners. That's a lot of income for the country that's leaving in terms of the revenue. But what I've seen is that a lot of young South African professionals, chartered accountants, engineers, they're looking for a better quality of life elsewhere. They're looking to earn a hard currency and be able to save up wealth in the pound sterling, as an example, or dollars. Has a lot more buying power and a lot more clout than the South African rand does long term for a person who's starting out.
So, Simonne, the article also says that although the tracking of immigration is not officially done, several pieces of data do show that South Africans are leaving. But the exact type of data that's being referred to here, how reliable is that? And also, if this is detrimental to the country's needs, to our own retention needs and economic growth, who is actually responsible for tracking that sort of data?
Sure, that's an interesting question. I suppose it would have to come from any immigration statistics, as in who comes and goes from the country in general. But I think that SARS one specifically, where people are financially immigrating, is probably a big indication of what is going on. The stuff we see within the recruitment industry is, merely just people looking for roles. Alternatively, our clients looking for talent, and a lot of the talent we find is quite thin on the ground from an experience perspective in certain industries, which we obviously stated as, IT, engineering, legal and finance, which are the very big ones.
So it's also been said that, some people have actually returned to South Africa, Simonne. But if we look at that, are you able to just share with us, your experience in terms of those that do return, and do they kind of return in more or less the same numbers as the ones who emigrate?
It is so interesting because I think we speak to people all the time who want to come back. They aren't necessarily back already. But when you're sitting earning pounds and wanting to come back and earn rands, that financial decision is quite a big one. So there is that element. It's also not that easy. And if I speak demographics, it's a lot of white South Africans that have left. And for them to come back and find employment, when you look at things like, the BEE and that, it is difficult for them to come back. And find employment, but it can also happen. A lot of it is also internal movement. If you work for a multinational, that mobility is so much easier, whether you've gone overseas through that company or you're coming back again.
So in terms of the reasons, do we get any information on that, or is that also difficult to glean why it is that people often return to South Africa? Apart from the multinational setup that you just pointed to, because, that's obvious, people move within the company here, there, everywhere. But for those who left, for reasons of seeking greener pastures, as an example, and then return to South Africa, do we know what the reasons are for their return?
I think it also depends on their reasons for leaving. It's so interesting when you speak to people. And again, it is just that, speaking to people that we get this information, is a lot of people return for family reasons. Their family is here. We always say, like, Africa's in your heart. And I don't think as South Africans we can ever really leave here. But also I don't think life is always that much easier abroad. The standard of living might be higher, but the way we live, in terms of space and freedom, albeit security issues aside, South Africans actually have a pretty great way of life in South Africa, and I think that people miss that abroad.
So what will it take, do you think, Simonne, for us to actually retain the sort of skills that we are concerned about losing at the moment? What needs to be done?
Look, I think a lot of investment needs to happen in terms of infrastructure. Eskom is a big one for people, and just the way of life is very difficult when you don't even have power to conduct meetings online, let alone run an organization. So I think it's a lot of infrastructure investment from the government specifically. I think perhaps a lot of corporates need to relook at how they treat their talent in terms of development and retention. And that's all obviously internal culture within corporates as well. It doesn't help if as a South African who's got an engineering degree, that you can have it better elsewhere. Immigration isn't a small decision. There's a lot of push and pull factors. And I think as a South Africa as a whole, whether it's a corporate or government decision, I think we need to have a very good look at what those things are and how we can improve them as a collective.
And just in terms of race and the demographic around that, again, in terms of the people who choose to leave the country when they do have these skill sets, are there any particular trends that we can glean in that regard, Simonne? For example, with engineers, would it be engineers of a specific racial group, or is it just engineers overall?
So within the very specific skill sets like engineering, they might be in high demand, especially what I saw recently was a friend of mine was poached because of their work with water, and hydraulics and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite specialized skills for that example. But and I think the reality is a lot of the guys that leave to go to Europe specifically have got ancestral visas or ancestral passports and do come from, British descent. And that British passport is quite a powerful one when you want to leave the country as well. So if you are a professional with that qualification, you have a lot more options.
Well, we are going to leave it there. Thanks so much for those insights. Generalist Senior Recruiter at REDi Recruitment, Simonne Adcock, talking to us there about the continuing concern of a skills strain due to numbers of people emigrating out of South Africa. Your thoughts always welcome, so you can get in touch with us and let us know what your views are.